just say, I think, I'm sure the room will agree, that the Alien Anthology is the industry standard DVD box set. You kind of set the bar incredibly high, now everybody else, including yourself, has to reach it. The simple thing to say first, you have the best job in the world. Can you explain to people what you do and how you do it and which films you've kind of worked on?
My job basically is, if you look at the DVD, it's pretty much everything except the movie, basically. So it's the behind-the-scenes documentaries. It depends. Each disc is a little bit different. Sometimes I'm involved in the menus, sometimes I'm involved in the packaging. Like with Blade Runner, for instance, I was on every part of that one because it was a very long-term project and it was very passionate. For me, I was very like intense about everything about that set. But in the case of the Alien series, my first involvement was in 1998-99 on the 20th anniversary Alien DVD. I had been working for Ridley Scott's company, Scott Free, for a few years, and I was the only one at the time who really knew what DVD was. And I kind of went to Ridley, you know, this is going to be big, you really should get in on it. So I kind of briefed him on what DVD could do, and as Ridley was about to go into this meeting with Fox to talk about the first Alien set, he just kind of looked at me and said, "Do you want to be in charge?" And I said, "Sure." And I kind of started with that, and then I started to learn more and more about DVD production. So by the time Alien Quadrilogy rolled around in 2003, which began as, it was originally going to be, Fox used to have this thing called the 5-star collection. And they were just going to do a 2-disc 5-star collection of Alien, and I kept going to them saying, "Can we please do Alien 3, because that's the one that needs the most work. I mean, there's a different cut, there's a lot of juicy behind-the-scenes stories, can we do that?" And Fox was kind of like, "Well, we're not too interested in that." And we went back and forth until finally one day Fox just said, "You want to do all 4? Like, okay, I'll do all 4. So that became the Quadrilogy set, where we shot about 80 interviews, I think, across the 4 films all over the world, and created just hours and hours of documentaries and behind the scenes and deleted scenes and commentaries and art galleries and things like that. So that then morphed into the Alien Anthology Blu Ray set, which came out last year, which we added several more hours of material to. So basically when it comes to everything but the movie, and sometimes actually I'm involved in the cuts, like the director's cuts. Alien 3, me and my team, we put that together. Alien director's cut we started working on, it really changed his mind about what he wanted to go into that cut. Alien Resurrection, which I'd rather not talk about. But that was kind of, you know, the brief. Put together all the extras, develop the special edition cuts for those 3 movies, because Aliens already had its special edition done years before on Laserdisc. And so same with like Blade Runner. I mean, I worked on Blade Runner off and on for 7 years, you know, restoring that to the final cut. So it really all depends. What the job changes, title to title to title.
And in terms of the store of materials, you know, what do you have to get for something like Alien, which is over 30 years old? Is there kind of a big box somewhere just full of kind of old bits of film? You know, where do you find it? How long does it take us to go through and discern what's working?
I wish it was just in a big box somewhere. It's a global search. It's like movie archaeology. You know, you have to really go all over, and you know, you have to contact cast and crew, and you know, did they save anything? Do they have anything in their archives? The studio has their own archive. I mean, they do have, as you know, they do have you know, thousands of images, and they have like the negative, and they have some footage. But the trick is, the interesting stuff is what the crew, you know, amassed during their time working on the film, and that's when you get kind of like the more rare photos and film clips and things like that. So we spend several months just casting a wide net to try to get as much, you know, material as we can for the disc.
And it's kind of, it's a real in praise of your approach to this as an art form, creating these DVDs. That both the Alien set and the Blade Runner set represent a kind of honesty. In an industry not priding itself on honesty and revealing things, you've kind of gone at it almost in a journalistic way and said, "I want to tell the stories." You know, that can't be easy to convince 20th Century Fox and Warner Brothers that you want to show it warts and all, especially in the case of Alien 3.
Right. Well, I think the thing I do is I approach it without an agenda. It's like I'm not trying to dig up dirt. I'm just trying to, because I when I was in college, I was a journalism major actually, and I was editor-in-chief of our paper and all that. So I try to approach it with a journalistic eye. But if you just present it as like honest, but without any kind of there's not malicious intent here. It's like we're just trying to tell the story. You can get a lot of stuff through. I mean, there are things I've had to cut out, some certain hot topics that were a little too hot for DVD. But I don't think there's anything in the Blade Runner or Alien sets that are malicious or mean, or it's just you have very passionate people, butting heads, and that creates sparks, and that's kind of what's interesting about the process is like through all that chaos, through all those arguments, through all that fighting, they create amazing movies. And I think you look at films like Apocalypse Now. That was well known for being a very difficult shoot, and it's a brilliant film. And Hearts of Darkness, that documentary, wonderfully shows that.
How can you tell us about each of the directors and for the 4 Alien films and what input they've had or not had, and how you work with them?
Well, I mean, Ridley's great because he kind of lets me get on with it. He lets me just do the job. I mean, he gives me some ideas, or I'll run things by him for his approval. But on the whole, he lets me kind of do what I do. In terms of Aliens, that was a bit different because both times Jim Cameron was off doing other projects. In the first case, it was Titanic. In the second case, actually, no, it was too early for Titanic. I guess it was just during the lull between Titanic and Avatar. But on Anthology, he was definitely off in Avatar world. So that I kind of had to work with his people at Lightstorm at his company and through Fox. And he would approve things from afar, but really his only involvement was doing the commentary for the Quadrilogy set, which was really difficult to get. But it was fun. I mean, he really had a lot to offer. I thought it was just brief and intense. Fincher wanted nothing to do with it. With Alien 3, we tried and we tried and we tried. I really wanted to get him badly for the documentary because I thought of all of them, he's the one with the biggest axe to grind. Like he's the one who really had a lot to say. He didn't have his heart in it. We tried. And then Genet, I went to Paris and I shot his interview and his commentary, and he was okay. He didn't seem like he was really passionate about it, but he cared. He definitely cared, and he wanted it presented correctly. So his was more of a straightforward relationship, which was again brief, but he approved it.
Has there been anything that's radically surprised you in this kind of archaeology of going back and look at these films? You've unearthed something, you thought that's completely changed my perspective, or added something new, to any of the films.
Alien. In the dailies, it's been really interesting to go through because I got to go through pretty much all the dailies from Alien, and just how precise Ridley was in how he shot things. Like it wasn't like a lot of films today are shot with like 9 cameras on set, and you just basically hose the scene down hoping to get something. You just try to get whatever you can, and then you figure it out in editing. The dailies from Alien were like, that is the film. I mean, it was almost like edited in camera. It was very precise. Aliens, we actually did put in the last dregs of footage that people haven't seen before, including the burnt cocoon scene, which we had not been allowed to show previously. So, with that it was a little different in terms of like how smart I think Cameron was in doing a lot for a little. It's like it goes back to the kind of Roger Corman school of filmmaking that he came from in terms of when he was working on Escape from New York and Galaxy of Terror and all these other films. Is like that kind of low budget filmmaking really helped Aliens look like a much more expensive film than it is. And then Alien 3, the interesting stuff was the behind the scenes footage and just the tension. And there's this great bit which we originally, I don't know if you know the story, but on the Quadrilogy set, the Alien 3 documentary was cut pretty heavily. We had to cut a half hour out of the documentary, and I took my name off of it because it was cut so deeply. This time around, we got to restore it to its full length, and one of those bits that got cut out was Fincher just sitting on set, and he's just kind of like looking around like this, and he sees the boom mic from the EPK crew, and he just looks up and he pulls it down, and he says, it's amazing Fox is the #1 studio when they're all a bunch of morons, and throws the mic back up. And that was a great moment because it showed his tension and his frustration with the studio.
Alien 3, I think you've done a supreme job without Fincher's help. I've seen the working cut, I'm sure most of you have. I think it's a kind of a valid movie. You've kind of unearthed, because the original cut doesn't make sense. It's got wonderful moments, but it's kind of strange and odd. But with the Alien 3, it's got the working cut. What do you call it? The
work print was what we called it.
You've actually kind of pulled out a valid film and a real sense of what David Fincher was getting at and might have, if he'd been left alone, actually created. I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about that, because that was more than just a kind of a DVD exercise. That was kind of, well, trying to edit the film properly, really, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, basically when Fincher said, I'm not going to be a part of it, you can do whatever you want. I mean, you have my blessing to do whatever you want, but it's not my movie, so just do whatever you want. So we started basically trying to dig up all the negative and all the footage that had been stored for Alien 3, and what I was really looking for was a lost cut of the film, hoping that there would be one. And we actually went quite a while without finding that lost cut, and then we did. We finally did. It was just, where there were hundreds of boxes to go through. And what I noticed back then was when a film is done, they don't really think you're going to go back into it. So they just kind of shove stuff in a box and then they can send it off. So it wasn't cataloged very well. So we finally found this long cut of the film, which was the longest, most complete cut of the film before any reshoots, before Fincher went to test screenings, before he got the notes back from the studio. So this was like the purest uncut Fincher version we could find, even though that in and of itself was probably not entirely free of compromise.
Yeah.
So we took that cut, we restored it. I believe we even sent it off to Fincher to say, hey, take a look, let us know what you think. And he didn't really respond, but we started conforming. We went to the original negative and started conforming to that cut.
Yeah.
Now the problem was there was still a lot of visual effects shots that were never even started because they abandoned that cut so early on. Like a lot of the stuff on Fury 161, where we see the EEV kind of floating offshore and all that, like that was never, they never even started that. Or the shots, the crane shots looking down of the prisoners with the EEV on shore, we had to actually add the ocean, the waves coming in. That wasn't there because we shot at Shepperton, right? So, or Pinewood, no, we shot at Pinewood, that's right.
Am I thinking that's the only exterior in all 4 films?
You mean like real world exterior?
Shot in
yeah.
Real world exterior. There's no other shot in any of the films that's an exterior.
I think you're right about that. Yeah. So I spoke with Richard Edlund, who was the visual effects supervisor on that film, and he gave me his big Bible, basically, of all the storyboards, all the notes that they had originally planned to implement, and we just sort of went from there and used it. We basically tried to get as much guide as we could from Fox, the filmmakers, because they weren't going to be hands-on with this, and we just kind of went from there. All told, we spent 14 months on the Quadrilogy, out of which I'd say at least half of that was devoted to Alien 3. But I had 3 teams working simultaneously on those 3 special edition cuts. So, and actually the biggest team was 3. 3 had the most people on it because that had the most amount of work that had to be done. But I would say it was at least probably like 7 or 8 months. But we'd do a little bit at a time, and we might move on to something else and come back to it. Visual effects would take, a lot of extra time. Music, re-editing, and as you may know, on the Quadrilogy set, the sound on Alien 3 sucked. It was like the dialogue was terrible because we didn't have those actors. We had to use the production sound. We had these big fans going and smoke machines. And so for the Anthology Blu Ray set, we actually did go. We got Sigourney Weaver, Lance Henriksen, and Charles Dance to come back and loop their lines. So now it's clean, and now it sounds a million times better on the Blu Ray. We had at our disposal a vintage making of featurette that we pretty much mined all the footage out of for the new documentary, the Superior Firepower. I believe there was some rights issues and also space issues on the disc that maybe that's why it's not on there. But we kind of just we start any project trying to bring in all the original material that's out there and see, okay, does this fit in the set, or what are the clearance issues, if any? So I remember there being, and I apologize, it's been years since we actually did that set, but I seem to recall there were some clearance issues on that. There's a documentary called Yeager's Alien, which we wanted to use. It's on Laserdisc in Japan, or originally was, and we tried to get it. We actually made efforts on all these kind of vintage featurettes to include them, and just sometimes you just don't get the permission to do it.
Do you feel that they're complete now with the anthology, or is this an ongoing thing that in 5 years' time you can do a new version of it with more complete background materials?
I'd say it's complete-ish. I think you can always do more. That's the thing, and it's not intentional. It's not like we didn't hold stuff back to say, oh, we're going to screw you down the line with another triple dip or whatever. Honestly, it's never that. It's always just what will fit, and do we have permission to use it. We can always do more. I mean, we did 5 discs on Blade Runner. I can do more if we had to do it. But it's really what's interesting. What is a good story to tell, and do you have the material to support that story? That's what kind of dictates what we put on a disc. And most of the time, I tend to run out of space on a disc because we have so much great story to tell.
In your career in doing this, there are some directors who are resistant to pulling the curtain back. Spielberg is kind of, he has a kind of mixed relationship with the DVDs. He doesn't do commentaries. He thinks it kind of spoils the magic of just simply watching the film. I wonder how you feel about it. Have you ruined films for yourself in some ways?
Somewhat, yeah. I think I have, actually. But every film is different, and every film is unique, and there's a commonality to filmmaking that's going to be the same. There's pre-production, there's production, there's post-production. That's not changing as much as George Lucas wants to change it. But I think that there's always a new interesting story to tell that is not demystified to the point where you've lost the magic of movies. That's why I tend to try to focus on the human story of like what were the challenges these people were facing in the making of this film, not how this computer artist created this character, and we spend like hours and hours and hours of iterations of Andy Serkis with dots on his face doing this and this and this. It's interesting once you've seen it, but once you've seen it, that's kind of it. It's like, what did Andy Serkis have to do as a performer to be Caesar or Gollum or whatever? I mean, that to me are the interesting stories I want to know about. And that's where you can pull the curtain back without completely destroying the magic, is when you talk about the process rather than actually how to do it. I mean, I've said this a lot to friends, is that I don't think it's any particular DVD's responsibility to teach you how to make movies. I think it's the responsibility to teach you how that movie was made. So I don't want to do like a film school 101 disc. That's where you really destroy. I think the magic is when you start to do those types of behind the scenes. My assistant at the time didn't understand the logistics of getting from London to Paris and back again, and she had me going from London to Paris and back in like the same day, and I had to chew her out for that. But that was like one day. I was here doing interviews. We did some Aliens interviews at Pinewood actually, and then she had me going to Paris on the same day to do Genet and Dominique Pinon and those guys, and I couldn't do it, so it's like we had to reschedule that entire trip after that. But so it was a blur. I don't remember much of it, but I do remember going to Paris. And I do remember talking to Genet. It was very nice, and we interviewed him for it. And we actually went back again and had him do a new introduction for Resurrection, because he didn't want people to think that the special edition cut was his director's cut. His director's cut is the theatrical cut, and that's the one he's happy with. So there you go. Tried to get Joss Whedon. He was not interested. We have his original EPK interview, electronic press kit, for those of you who don't know what that means. So we used that, but I really was hoping to get a retrospective interview with Joss Whedon, just because I know he has some issues with how the movie turned out. But he declined, so we tried. The Mother Mode interactive thing, that was really interesting. That developed over the course of a year. And the idea was basically how to use Blu Ray technology to enhance the experience, for viewers who've seen this stuff in various forms, a million different ways. And what was interesting about Blu Ray is that, the Blu Ray player has its own internal memory, so it kind of knows what you've done. So if you put in disc 1 and then take out disc 1 and put in disc 5, it knows that. So we were basically able to have the 6 discs in the set talk to each other, essentially. So that's where Mother Mode came out of, was Mother essentially remember what you did, what you were interested in, and what you tagged, and therefore it could take you directly to those things. So if you only want to know about chest bursters, like you have a chest burster fetish and that's all you care about, you would click that and they would take you to the chest burster behind the scenes materials for all 4 films. So that's it was just basically a very fancy way of indexing the content. But because Mother provided a great sort of thematic device, we just kind of ran with that. It was fun. I think it's a little too complicated. I think we could have maybe dumbed it down and had a more elegant experience with it. But we were still figuring it out as we were going, to be honest. But it's pretty robust. I mean, you can do anything you want with it if you know how to use it. It's just figuring it out. It's a little difficult. It's a little too PC and not enough Mac. It needs to be a little more Mac, I think. But we tried.
Just go back to Alien Resurrection for a bit. I mean,
You have to.
I've read the Joss Whedon script.
Yeah, so
and it's quite exciting, the Joss Whedon script.
It's better, yeah. I mean,
And you can see some of the reasons why they didn't shoot it as it was.
Yeah.
And to me, it's a film with a great Sigourney Weaver performance, but a kind of a nonsensical tone of voice. I wonder where you stand on it, how you feel about it.
Well, I think it's a film made by an incredibly talented group of people. I mean, everybody on that film is just superb at what they do. It's just the overall didn't mesh, and I think a lot of that has to do with the tone of it. I think it's a little too much of a parody of an alien film. It's a little too meta comical in a way, and I feel like the first three films took themselves seriously. I mean, there were different variations of fun. I mean, we were talking earlier about Aliens as a really fun movie, but it takes itself seriously. It never jokes at the film's own expense, whereas Resurrection was really jokey, I thought, and that kind of took me out of that as a serious film. But I think the design work on display is fantastic. I think the cinematography is amazing, and interesting cast. So it's not my favorite of the four. I'll tell you that.
What is it about the Alien films, starting with Alien, that seems to lend themselves to this kind of wonderful kind of mix of movie mythology and making of and experience and Blade Runner has it as well to some extent. So maybe it's all Ridley, but that allows you to make such wonderful, luxuriant DVDs.
Well, I mean, the thing is all of the directors they have to create these worlds, and that requires a lot of people applying a lot of imagination and a lot of skill to creating these worlds. I mean, just like look at this photo right there from Aliens. It's like that took a lot of people to put together, and as a process, it takes time and money and artistry and all these things, which is fascinating to see. Like the amount of work. It's not a documentary as much as like in the case of Alien. I think Alien feels like a documentary from the future because it's so real and tactile, and you actually you see the little details on the keyboards, and those things are like, wow, this is a real universe that exists somewhere, right? And it took a lot of work to do that. So it's very easy as a documentarian to go into that. And I think for those of us that love these films, we want to know everything we can about it. And not to get too detailed about it, but I'm documenting Prometheus now, and I'm treating it with that in mind. Is like I'm treating Prometheus as though I'm the 11-year-old. I'm the 11-year-old when I saw Alien in the theater for the first time. It's like, I want to know everything, but guess what? I can actually document it myself. So I'm actually going through and just trying to capture everything I can. So that to me is what's fascinating about these films. You have these very strong directors with a strong vision, and they are surrounded by an army of very talented filmmakers and cast and crew to make these films. And plus, it's science fiction, so it's a genre of imagination that I think engages us on a level that some kind of like bank heist movie wouldn't. It's just being immersed in a world that doesn't exist. This last year, I have not spent much time at home, to be honest. I have been on set, just traveling back and forth. I mean, I was traveling from LA and New York on Spider-Man to all over the States for Transformers to here for Prometheus. So it's been, it's run a little spacey even now. I'm still getting over a year's worth of jet lag, but to me, it's the best way to do it because you're not just phoning it in. You're not having like someone shoot and then you just collect the footage and try to make sense of it. To actually be there and to kind of get the sense of the crew and the cast and the director and what they're going through really helps inform your story when you are sculpting together a documentary that's not just Ridley's a genius. This is going to be a great film. It's like I'm so sick of that type of promotional fluff. It's like I want to get to the nuts and bolts of what the film is, and I think you really only get that when you're on set and you're hearing it from the crew that eventually start trusting you. I mean, the great thing about Ridley's movies is I've known these people for years and years and years, so they actually just come to me right off the bat and they'll tell me what's really going on. I may not be able to go into the details of that necessarily, but it informs the tone of the overall piece, and that's what goes back to the honesty thing. Like, it feels honest, it feels like you're really there, and I think that's what makes for compelling behind the scenes material. It depends. It depends. It depends on the studio. It depends on the director. It depends on the scene they're shooting. You know, if they're shooting like some hot sex scene, obviously I'm not going to be there with my video camera, you know, shooting that. So we have to, you know, have some decorum and some, you know, some sense of sensitivity to these things. But you know, I generally try to blend in and be really like almost like a fly on the wall. A lot of other guys who do what I do, they try to befriend the crew to the point that, you know, they're goofing off with the crew and the camera's in their face and they're like going, ooh, you know, we're having a great time. I tend to try to be invisible. I would rather just be forgotten about, because that's when I get the really good stuff, is when people forget that I'm there. Like I forget that camera's there and it's recording everything I'm saying and it's going to be online, so be very, very careful about what I say about certain things. But the first time I really noticed that was on Matchstick Men. That was the first time Ridley allowed me to really document the whole process. And that started because of a TV show, I don't know if you had it here, called Project Greenlight, which was basically a whole series devoted to the making of a low-budget film. And one day I was in the cafe area of RSA in LA, and Ridley just kind of leaned over and they were talking about Project Greenlight. He says, hey, do you want to do that for Matchstick Men? I said, okay, sure, I'll start documenting today, because I had my camera on the car. And you know, the camera was pretty small, and people forgot that I was even doing that. So I had like hundreds and hundreds of hours of really, you know, intimate, immersive material that kind of set the tone for everything after that I wanted to do on these bigger projects, when I did have a full crew and a full budget and everything like that, where I kind of said, look, let's be respectful but try to be honest and get people to trust us so they do share these things with us, because if we burn them, then they're going to shut down on us, or we're not going to get interesting material. So it's always it's a balance of what's real and true, but what's, you know, not going to, you know, offend somebody or make them look bad. I don't think we've ever done that. I don't think we've ever made anyone look bad. I mean, it might be we show some conflicts that people are uncomfortable about, but the result of it was a great movie. You know, it's not like that person was fired and their career's in shame. It's like, no, there was a clash, but out of that clash came great ideas and a great final film.
And if you could turn the clock back, if you could sort of, in your time machine, travel back, is there a film you would love to kind of reverse engineer on and go back and do, you know, document, just as you could, and, you know, they didn't do it in the past?
You mean one that I haven't done?
Yeah, any film from Chaplin onwards, you know, is there something you said,
well, I mean,
I'd love to have done?
Yeah. Well, in light of a recent release, Star Wars, you know, I don't feel Star Wars has been treated properly. Which is not to say it hasn't been treated lavishly. It's like they've done an amazing job in terms of like the scope and the amount of content they've developed. But I've never felt like it was done with the love that comes from a kid that actually saw that Star Destroyer on the screen, that when that first image, and just like having their life change because of that. That's a pretty profound moment, you know, if you're a movie nerd like I am, you know. And I don't feel in any of the Star Wars discs that I've ever felt that sense of awe. I get the sense of importance, but never that sense of like childlike awe that it created. That summer of 1977, which you're too young to know about, was mind-blowing. It was an amazing time. I mean, seriously, really changed a whole generation of kids who are now filmmakers, who are now well-established filmmakers, you know. And I would love to capture that kind of joy of imagination of, like, you know, wherever you live in whatever part of the world and whatever, you know, economic class you're in, you can be Luke Skywalker. You can imagine, you know, these far off worlds and those adventures, and you can write your own. You can draw on your own. You can film on your own. That Star Wars empowered all these kids to be creative and not, you know, get into, like, you know, shadier parts of life. I mean, it really kind of saved a bunch of kids, and I feel like Star Wars has kind of lost its way in a way. And that, to answer your question, is what I would love to do, even though it'll never happen. I interviewed Stan, and I interviewed the guys at his shop, you know, Shane and Richard and those guys, and it was interesting. I mean, in retrospect, I wish I had, I mean, not to say I wish I had known that Stan was going to eventually pass away, but it's like I would have cherished it more than I did, because it was, you know, to be honest, it was one of 80 interviews that we had to conduct, and Stan, to be perfectly honest, was kind of in a pissy mood that day. He was not, you know, really nice. But on camera, he was great, and that's all that matters. It didn't matter how he was off camera, you know. I mean, he had a lot on his mind, I'm sure, and now we know more than we knew at the time, you know. But he was great. I mean, and the commentary he did with Galen Hurd, I thought was quite good. And he's, I think in many ways he was a performer. So he really loved to tell stories, and he told some great stories for the Quadrilogy interviews, I thought. And he had an enormous amount of pride in his work, which was great. So yeah, I'm really glad we got him. I'm glad we have that interview, and we used more outtakes of that in the Anthology Blu Ray set and the enhancement archive. So we pretty much got most of it out there. But yeah, he was definitely a part of it. The thing is, here's the thing: when you put together any DVD or Blu Ray set, there's hundreds of hours. You can't fit all that on a disc, and you have to give it meaning. I'm sure a lot of you guys would love to watch all of the uncut dailies from the movies, from the documentaries and all that. I mean, it's a lot of stuff to go through, and you have to kind of shave it down to just what is the coherent story. So yeah, there's probably extra stuff of Stan, but it just isn't interesting, I mean, because it's Stan, and because now we kind of cherish his memory, it's like, well, yeah, we want to see everything, and maybe again one day there'll be an archive of everything that you can go through. But when you're trying to squeeze not just an amount of content onto a disc that holds approximately 3 or 4 hours of video, but you're trying to tell a compelling story that captures the spirit of what these people went through, you can't just let the tape roll. You're not going to get it. It's going to be dry and just uninteresting. I mean, you're going to have to capture the journey these people took for these films. So I thought Stan was pretty well represented, I felt.
Yeah. I gather you've also completed your own feature film now. You kind of crossed over.
I did.
Can you tell us about that and how good the DVD extras might be at some point?
You're going to think this is funny. Well, I'll go the other way. So I just finished directing my first film. It's called Crave, with Ron Perlman for Alien Resurrection, and Edward Furlong, the original John Connor. I guess he's technically the original, even though there was a guy before him in T2. But and a couple of upcoming actors named Josh Lawson and Emma Lung, who are great. And it's a psychological thriller of sorts, but kind of more in a fun Fight Club kind of way. It's great. I'm really happy with the way it turned out, and so my assistant shot behind-the-scenes footage every single day, even when I lost my temper occasionally, and which I thought was great because I've done it to other directors, so it's only fair that I get busted on this stuff.
What we in the profession call a bad one.
You look into the mirror, you realize you're going to hell. Maybe you'll forgive me, God. Forgive me for the things I've done, and for the things I've yet to do.
Every one of us has a good wolf and a bad wolf living inside of us. So the young kid says to him, well, which one is stronger? And the old guy says, whichever one you feed more.
Yeah, I'm really proud of it. I mean, it was great to finally, get that done, because ever since I was a kid, I've been wanting to direct a film, and I just didn't want to be on my deathbed not having done it, so I finally got to do it. And hopefully there'll be more to come.
Yeah, is that the ambition now, is it, to kind of further that side of your career?
Absolutely.
And become a regular filmmaker?
Yeah. I'm tired of being an irregular filmmaker. I want to get out of DVD. But DVD pays the bills, and more than that, it's a great job. I mean, and they're great movies, and I love the process, even to this day, even having been through it a million times, watching other people do it and documenting it. Now that I've done it for my own film, I want to make my own movies, but I still want to kind of keep a little pinky toe in the pool of DVD and kind of just keep that going, for as long as it seems to want to go. I don't know. I mean, the world of the future of DVD and Blu Ray is kind of in a dark place right now. It's kind of sketchy, so we don't know where it's going to end up. But I'm always game if it's a great project, and I'm lucky enough to be on great projects.
Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for John Douglas.